I hadn't stopped to think about this much until now, but I have to admit, I think the American way makes more sense. Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to words. People who've been following my channel for a while may remember that back in the day, a few months ago, I started a little series of videos about words that Britain and America use differently. And then the pandemic happened, I moved apartments, and I completely forgot to continue the series until today. And so without any further ado, here are 8 words that Britain and America use differently, part 5. Funnily enough, there are some word differences to do with fitness that I completely forgot, mostly because I have no fitness. Jumping jacks is one of those. Here in the United States, I learned it meant this stuff when you jump up and down and do that with your legs and your arms. In Britain, those are referred to as star jumps. In fact, Americans, be careful not to ask British people to do jumping jacks for you, especially if they're in your house, because in Britain, a jumping jack is a type of firework. You get more aerobic exercise just putting out the fire. Now, both countries use the term jumping jack in the sense of the toy. A jumping jack is a figurine whose limbs are made to move by the pulling of a string, kind of like me on a Monday morning. The word squash can have many senses on both sides of the pond, including, of course, squashed in, just as I am in this studio. Or, and I completely forgot about this because again it pertains to fitness, there's the sport squash. And sure enough, you will find both of those words in the United States and in Britain. You might also find the term squash in the sense of edible plant life, particularly those that are popular at this time of year. I don't really have any data to back this up, but I imagine that that iteration of it is a bit more prominent in the United States. And the reason I say that is if you were to go to England and ask somebody, hello, do you have any squash? They're not going to hand you something of the butternut variety. In fact, they're going to bring you a drink. Because in Britain, the word squash is used to describe a kind of non-alcoholic concentrated syrup, which is added to water, sometimes to alcohol to make an alcoholic version of squash, and you've got yourself a fruity drink. Confusingly, a lot of people drink these in the summer, so they are their own form of summer squash. This one can get a British person in trouble when they move to America, like when I told somebody, hello, hi, yes, I'm not wearing any pants. You know, there's more to the conversation than that. And they looked down and saw that I was in fact wearing what they would call pants, which is trousers. And then I explained to them, no, pants is underwear, it's okay. And then they gave me another judgmental look because they didn't think that that was all right. Fun piece of trivia though, it could be said that the British used to use the word pants to mean trousers. And that's because the word pants is a shortening of pantaloons, a type of trouser that we once wore. Nowadays, it's taken on another meaning in Britain to mean rubbish, as in not very good. I'll give you an example. 18th century pantaloons were absolute pants. While we're on the subject of clothes, we all know that Brits and Americans can't agree on jumper versus sweater. But did you know that upper body garment terminology differences don't end there? Head down to any beach in California or Florida and the chances are you'll bump into somebody who's wearing what Americans call a tank top, so long as you also travel back in time to the 90s. Think about Hulk Hogan. He wore about 1,000 tank tops, mostly because he kept ripping them, which is a terrible waste. Anyway, that's not what a tank top is in Britain. A British tank top, and this might be the most British thing since William Shakespeare was given the COVID vaccine, is a jumper/sweater without sleeves. So what name then, you might be thinking, do the British use for what Americans call a tank top? And the answer is this. As you can see, it gets ever more confusing. In the United States, a vest is sort of a sleeveless garment that somebody might wear over a shirt. Usually worn by somebody classy and beautifully dressed like Heath Ledger's Joker. I always learn from the best, but for the first 26 years of my life, I didn't know this as a vest. I knew it as a waistcoat. And you can sort of see why it's called that in Britain, because it is a waist of a coat. Your arms freeze in the winter. And as I alluded to a moment ago, in Britain, a vest is what the Americans would call tank top. And this extends to various types of tank top, including what Americans refer to as wife beater, which, believe it or not, has also made the list. That's right, amazing. Britain and America both have different meanings for the term wife beater that isn't Henry VIII. In the US, it's one of those really manly tank tops that bears the sweat of anybody still brave enough to wear one, or John McClane. And in the US, the garment was nicknamed a wife beater. And why was that? Because the character of Stanley Kowalski wore one in Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. And as well as brazenly showing off his rampant masculinity, he also beat up his wife. Stanley was not a nice man, but thankfully also not a real one. But that didn't stop his character, particularly one of his famous lines, from influencing the British use of wife beater. In the UK, people will use this term to specifically describe the beer brand Stella Artois, probably since the name sounds like Stella Dubois, which just happens to be the name of the wife of Stanley Kowalski. As someone who once acted in the play version of A Streetcar Named Desire, I'm very familiar with the famous line, Stella! Which is what British people shout on a Friday night, but for different reasons. Davenport. Unlike my own, it's not a particularly common last name. So what are the chances then that on either side of the pond it spawned two different types of furniture? The first of these to come about was the British Davenport desk. It was sort of a late 18th century writer's desk with all of these mysterious different compartments that you could fold up and fold down and open up and open out. I'm not saying I want one, but randomly, I think you should know that I plan to launch a PO box next year. And the table was named for the person who commissioned the design, the English naval captain, Josiah Davenport. About 100 years later, across the Atlantic in Massachusetts, the company A.H. Davenport and Company rolled out what would become a popular sofa in the United States, the Davenport. In fact, it became so successful that in parts of the United States, it just became another word for sofa. Nowadays, you hear about Davenport sofas in the sense that they are formal or posh, but do you know what's really posh? Sitting at your Davenport writer's desk while also sitting on your Davenport sofa after making a visit to your PO box. Of course, if you happen to live on our final entry, you might have some trouble getting them up the stairs. Or not. So here's the thing, the question of whether or not you need to take the elevator/lift to the first floor might depend upon whether you are in Britain or America. And that's because in the UK, the first floor is the floor above the ground floor, which I think by default becomes floor 0. It's as if the ground floor doesn't exist. There is no lobby. On the other hand, in the United States, the first floor is the ground floor, or, you know, the first floor you enter. I hadn't stopped to think about this much until now, but I have to admit, I think the American way makes more sense. I do still prefer British weather though, so that keeps things even. This has been another episode of Vlogmas. Can you believe we are 9 days in? If you haven't yet subscribed to Lost in the Pond, make sure you do so at the end of this video so that you don't miss another Vlogmas episode. And a big thank you once again to all of my patrons who make these videos possible. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. Until tomorrow, good night.